Right now, it's football at 4. Johnny Mac's in the house. Let's get in to our NFL topics for the day. We got a lot of them, so let's dive in. And Johnny Mac, welcome back. What's going on, pal?
Not much. How are you guys?
We're doing all right. I know that this is the silly time of year. There's agents telling people stuff, so both sides are trying to get stuff out. But let's try to make some sense of the stuff. And the one thing I want to get into, and I thought there was an interesting article Jimmy Kempski wrote about Alshon Jeffrey. And I know everybody is trying to make sense of it all. The possibilities, is there anything kind of there? And I want to kind of get from you the realistic nature that Alshon Jeffrey would not be wearing an Eagles uniform, and what are the possibilities of that happening? Because even after I read the article, I felt like there doesn't seem like many outs here in this hand of poker.
No, that is really going to go down as one of the worst contracts, at least Howie Roseman has signed, at least early in the contract, because if you go back to last year and when he tried to do this, and as he often does, and it usually works more often than not, get a little bit more room, a little bit more flexibility at the moment, and it tends to be a very good thing to do. However, in this particular circumstance, floor dropped out under Alshon Jeffrey, which I don't think anybody projected. I don't think anybody saw that coming, but that's what happened. And then you add on top of it the Alshonimous rumors and the assumption that he's the one and he's the problem in the locker room and he's the chemistry issue, and everybody wants him out of here. Except you can't get him out of here because the salary cap hit is just too much. It is significant. The Eagles aren't going to be able to trade him, and they're stuck with him. And it's not a good place to be in. But I think the part about being a locker room cancer and that part of it's overrated. The part that's bad is he's not very good anymore. And that's the bad part, because they need to move on from him, and they can't.
Of the scenarios, trading doesn't seem to be one. I throw that one out. I mean, you're not. And first off, I don't think, and I'll see what you think. I don't think Howie Roseman's saying to somebody else, "Hey, I'll give you a second-round pick to take him off my hands." I don't see Howie succumbing to that.
No, I think if you go back and Howie, and this is right, by the way, this is a shift in philosophy, and he mentioned it at his postseason press conference, and he talked about how you had this window of essentially 2017 to 2019. They were going all in. They were trying to win the Super Bowl. They didn't have draft picks. They had 5 in 2 consecutive years, which is really low, and now they have to change that. And they have to use more of their draft picks. So the last thing they're going to do is give up a second or even a third-round pick in an NBA-like salary dump to get rid of a player. They're just not going to do it. The most likely scenario, remember, he's also hurt. We haven't even gotten to that. And he's not going to have an off season. So I often tell fans, forget about your team. Think about the other side of the equation. Why would someone want Alshon Jeffrey? He's a descending player, as we talked about. He's speed deficient at this stage of his career. He's falling off the cliff, and he's not going to have an off season because he's rehabbing from the foot surgery. He's not going to be ready for week 1. He's probably not going to be ready till midway through the season. And you think you're going to trade this guy? And you can add to the top of that, Sunday, he's got a bad reputation for talking out of turn in the locker room.
My
How are you going to trade that?
My only rebuttal to that, John, not that I'm disagreeing with you, but I think you can look at a lot of what you're saying from both sides, like as to why the Eagles would end up keeping him and why they would maybe make more of an effort than we think they will in trying to trade him. And my only rebuttal question is, haven't we seen dumber deals? Like, haven't we seen crazier things happen? where teams
Yeah, I mean,
it
only takes one. I always say that, and I hear what you're saying, because not everybody's smart, and there are dumb organizations. And you think about, everybody will point to the Brock Osweiler deal as sort of the first NFL trade that is like just a salary dump. And Houston sent a second-round pick along with that to get rid of that contract. So you put that 5%, 10% chance on it, but man, you got to find a really dumb team if they're going to take on this contract and this player, who's also, as I said, even if you go back to Osweiler, he wasn't hurt. This guy's hurt on top of it, and is not going to be able to play. So if you have a bad organization saying, well, maybe he's got something left in the tank, we'll just roll the dice, wait till midway through the season, maybe he gets reborn, has a good season. I don't know. That's a lot of dumb to count on.
Yeah.
And you can't count on dumb. But it's not a strategy.
Are there any rules, CBA stuff? I know there was one mention about the new CBA could help them out maybe a little bit, but it does, like post March 1st, after June 1st, different dates like that. Anything that they could find that might be the best case scenario, or is the best case scenario just keeping him, riding it out, and hoping he can come back and play?
Well, the best case scenario is riding it out, just putting them on the PUP list and taking your medicine that way. There is no post-June 1st designation as we stand today in the final year of the CBA. So the Eagles would be hoping that a new CBA will be worked out by the start of the new league year on March 18th. If something gets done by then, and that's coming up pretty quickly, then the theory is you'll go back to the old system, and you will have that post-June 1st designation, and that would help the Eagles out a little bit if they wanted to just cut them. You have that $26 million of dead money. You can split it out over 2 years, about $16 million, about $10 million over 2 years. So that would help a little bit. If they wanted to go down that route, but then you're counting on the CBA getting done by March 18th, and that's difficult timing. It's possible. They've been negotiating. They've been close for a while. Everyone's hopeful it gets done sooner rather than later. But either way, it's all bad news. This is a bad contract, and it's a bad contract because the player, as I said, the floor fell out under the player. And I will give a little deference to Howie there, because I don't think anybody saw that coming. I really don't. But it certainly hasn't worked out.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people out there now, of course, hey, if Jeffrey's not back, and what do you do? And Philly, you joke about it all the time. As soon as a name seemingly becomes available, the question always gets asked, hey, is there a way? And Stefon Diggs' name keeps kind of surfacing out there. And I got a text from a buddy last night, hey, any way they can get Diggs? And my initial answer was 0.0. Did I jump the gun?
Well, I just as I said with Alshon, maybe knock it up a bit to 2.2. Look, if they have their visions on a particular player, they can get something done. They can always get something done. It doesn't make a lot of sense from a lot of different angles. The fact is, there's a lot of holes on this team, and they have to fill, as most teams, as I said yesterday. You got to fill holes at corner, linebacker, defensive tackle, receiver, as you know, backup quarterback, a lot of holes. And if you look at the draft, well, what's the strongest position in the draft? It's wide receiver. Mel Kiper had one of his conference calls today. I think he said 25 he projected to go in the first 3 rounds. That's how many good receivers are out there. Now, you have a certain amount of money, that you have to allocate throughout your roster. We just talked about Alshon Jeffrey and the untenable financial situation that's on the books with him. You still have Deshaun Jackson on the books, who makes a ton of money. And you're going to add another big-ticket item in Stefon Diggs. And, oh, by the way, you're not getting Stefon Diggs without giving up your first-round pick on top of it. So would you do that? Or would you go the cost-effective route, cross your fingers, say you get a wide receiver, whoever that might be, at number 21, and you have him under a rookie deal for 5 years? That just makes more sense because you have to use your free agency money to fill holes at cornerback and defensive tackle and linebacker and everything else. So if you're bringing in another, so then in theory you have Stefon Diggs who makes a ton of money, although for the type of player he is, you wouldn't have any problem paying him that money. But the reality is Deshaun Jackson makes a ton of money. Alshon Jeffrey makes a ton of money. It doesn't make sense. The only way it makes sense is if you can trade Alshon Jeffrey in a salary dump. But as we just mentioned, Howie just told you in January, we have to change this thing. We have to get younger. We have to use our draft picks. We finally have a normal amount of draft picks. And he's going to give up a second-round pick or a third-round pick to dump Alshon Jeffrey and then send his first-round pick to Minnesota? Does that sound like something that's going to happen? I would say 2.2%.
2.2.
And that's
So
only
you're saying there's a chance.
And that's only because Diggs is so good. And he is good, but it's not going to happen.
You sort of just answered this question, but that was in, regards to really like free agency and, Gil brought up Diggs. But how much of an impact does Alshon Jeffrey really have, or is going to have, I should say, in this team's off-season's plans? Like, how much in the way is he? Like, do they draft the wide receiver first because of his situation? Do they purposely maybe not and look elsewhere because he's going to be there? Like, how do they, organize this?
No, I don't think from a football sense. It's a bigger thing from a money perspective. They know they need to get better at wide receiver. They know they need to add speed, and they know they made a mistake with the rework deal with Alshon Jeffrey. So most of the hand-wringing involving Alshon is simply, what do you do? And my assumption is that, as I said, they're just going to put him on the PUP list, put him on the shelf, and take their medicine and pay him his money and move on next year as quickly as possible. Not next season, the season after that. That would be my guess. They know from a football perspective they need to add receivers. And as I said, the injury on top of it, even if you wanted to ignore his declining play on the field, it's not going to be ready in September. It's not going to be ready until probably best case scenario halfway through the season. So it's not going to help you there anyway.
All right, John McMullen.
It's a bad situation.
Yep. No, there's no question. Now, I don't know. McLean seemed to write there's a clause in his deal that could allow the Eagles to escape this. I didn't read his piece. I just saw it now. But do you recall or have any knowledge of what that clause might be to get them out of this thing?
Yeah, it's a clause that the Eagles can try to get back the money, basically contract detrimental to the team, which they can describe. So there's two parts to that, two prongs to it. And the fact that you would have to prove Alshon Jeffrey was the one talking to Josina Anderson. So that's number one. Unless Josina gives up her source, which he's not going to do, you're never going to be able to prove that. So that's A. But secondly, I think people forget Alshon Jeffrey, what he said. If you want to default to he said it, what he said wasn't that bad. all he said was the quarterback needs to check it down. The offense is too complicated. That kind of stuff is said 1,000 times over all 32 teams over the past 10, 15 years. Every single organization has gone through players who complain and moan anonymously. It's not that big of a deal. So for the assumption that the Eagles would actually go after this money, they're not going to do it because they're not going to win. And the NFL would fight it to the hilt. It would set an awful precedent because every single player would then be susceptible to have their money taken away for saying things like, oh, the offense is too complicated. Think about that. So any Eagles fan who is hoping that some clause in Alshon's contract will allow them to diffuse $26 million of dead money, I'll tell you right now, there is not a chance in the world. I just said always leave the door open, Mike, 2.2%, 5%, 0.0. That one is legitimately 0.0.
All right, let's hit a couple quick NFL things as we move on here. Football at 4. Jason Witten said he wants to be with the Dallas Cowboys, but he knows he might have somewhere else to go. I want to ask you flat out, does anybody else want Jason Witten? His 3 options were Cowboys, somewhere else, or retire. He says retire is out. Cowboys seem out. Is the third one going to be out too?
Houston Roughnecks.
Dallas Desperados.
Yeah.
What do they call?
Renegades. Come on.
Renegades. Yeah. What is the Desperados? Where did I get that from? That was an old
Los Angeles?
Any movie
is
ever.
That L.A.?
Any movie ever. Yeah, maybe any movie ever. No, I don't think anybody. Jason Witten was obviously a tremendous tight end, the king of the Y option route. I mean, just one of the great two-way inline tight ends of his generation, certain Hall of Famer. But we just talked about a descending player. There's a guy who can't run. So, I mean, it's tough to look at a player like that and in a new situation and say, oh, I want to build part of my offense around Jason Witten. Now, if there's a team that's really close or feels it's really close to being a Super Bowl contender, you can get him on a 1-year deal at the veteran minimum for him, which would be still pretty significant. Yeah, maybe they could go that direction, but I think we're nearing the end of the road. We were at the end of the road. And if Jason was better on Monday Night Football, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, but he wasn't.
Right. It seemed that he went out on his own and then decided that I'm going to come back. And I don't know, it just seems ugly. Like, all right, Jay, like that's enough, buddy.
His booth performance was that bad.
Yeah, right? Or his hair game was that bad.
True.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Speaking of...
I mean, Tony Romo, I think, spoiled television executives. They assumed that everybody would be Tony Romo the minute they step into the booth, and that's just a natural. And you aren't going to see a lot of Tony Romos. And they were hoping to duplicate that. You had another ex-Cowboy, really smart guy. It just didn't work out just because, you know, it's really hard to do that. And I always say it's very difficult to collect your thoughts and get them across to the audience very quickly. And that's what you have to do. And it generally takes years and years and years to get even mediocre at it. And Tony stepped into the booth, and he was the best analyst out there. And they thought it was going to happen again, and lightning doesn't often strike twice in the same spot.
Real quick, tight ends. Jordan Reed says he wants to continue playing with the Redskins. He's been in the concussion protocol 7 times. And also tight end Greg Olsen signed with the Seahawks, 1-year, $7 million deal. He's been doing color commentary, speaking of which, with the XFL. So a couple of tight end decisions there. I'm interested to see what happens with Reed because that guy could really play. Olsen, I don't know that if he impacts that offense, but he's been hurt so much.
Yeah, and real quick, the Eagles just officially released Nigel Bradham, so they made that official. But As far as Jordan Reed, I don't think he's still out of the concussion protocol in theory, because he was never cleared at the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, he can play. I mean, when he's out there, and we all know the issue. I think it's interesting.
Well, he has
with
been
Greg
cleared.
Olsen.
It says the report is that he has been cleared from the league's concussion protocol. That's as of 2:30.
I don't know how, because he wasn't cleared at the end of the season, but potentially, I mean, they're not obviously in any activities at this point. So, maybe they just do the baseline testing and say he's fine. But nonetheless, he's had so many concussions.
It's a shame.
It is a shame because he was one of the best receiving tight ends in this league. I thought Olsen, I mean, if you think about the Redskins and Ron Rivera, and you think about the Bills and the fact Sean McDermott is there and the GM was from Carolina, so many connections to those two particular teams, and he chose Seattle because of Russell Wilson. And you can't blame him for that. I mean, he chose the best quarterback. So from that standpoint, it makes some sense.
Yep. All right. Real quick. Joe Flacco, his agent confirms he plans to play in 2020. Will he find the same fate as Jason Witten? A door in the face.
I mean, everybody's looking for a veteran backup. And,
yeah, but does
and so many
Flacco
people
want that role? He just seems like the kind of guy that is like, screw you. I'm not doing that.
I don't know. He's always been. I mean, he's never been in that position. So I guess
Come on, he stood up to Schweimer. The Schweimer will never let him live it down.
That's the answer.
No, I like him more. I like him more now. To Schweimer.
You got to ask Schweimer about that. He goes off on that all the time.
Your schedule.
Hey, Mike, he big timed me, Mike.
Yeah, Joe Flacco's the guy who signed whatever that giant contract when he was the highest paid player in football at the time. And he celebrated by going through the drive-thru at McDonald's. He's never big-timed anybody except Billy Schwein, so I like him even more.
All right. Don't forget, Football at 4 is back tomorrow. We'll get into more NFL stuff. And by the way, as John just said, the Eagles have made it official. Nigel Bradham has been released, and we will continue to look at the Eagles offseason. We're less than a month from the opening of NFL free agency. Plus, we got the draft, and I do want to start getting into some draft conversation as well in our Football at 4. And we're back again tomorrow. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, man. John McMullen, the All Guest appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.